The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Maynard Bangs presiding. Again, the order is for the Honorable Judge Bangs.
Hey, if our other judges were prepared, be seated! Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus The Silence of the Lambs, a 1991 crime thriller about a young FBI cadet who seeks the assistance of an incarcerated serial killer in order to catch one still on the loose. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Miss Rachel Robbins, you are presenting the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you. The Silence of the Lambs, as you rightly just pointed out, is a psychological horror thriller. As you can see from that description, the words romantic and comedy do not feature. And yet someone I know thought it would be a great second date. Not only was it our second date, he also brought his friend Will along for the ride. I'm still with that man 33 years later.
What?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with me. But what I want to say, that if you're in any doubt, The Silence of the Lambs is not date movie material. In fact, my prosecution is going to lie on the fact that it is basically yucky. That's my opening statement.
All right. Thank you. Appearing on behalf of defense is Mr. What Do We Covet? Mr. Ryan Luis Rodriguez, please present your opening statement.
When I learned that we would be bringing The Silence of the Lambs into the Reels of Justice, I thought, now that's an interesting idea. Versus what? Red Dragon? It would easily win. Manhunter? I would bet on that one. Hannibal Rising? Who are we kidding? But then I was informed, no, someone just wants to prosecute it. Yes, someone wants to prosecute a film that scored 7 Academy Award nominations and won 5. Only the third film in history to sweep all of the major categories: picture, director, screenplay, actor, and actress. Oh no! Whatever will I do?
You're going to eat those words. You're going to eat them.
I sure hope so. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm not done yet.
No, I thought you were. It's a stylistic pause. Okay.
If you've been listening to this podcast since we began in the year of our Lord 2020, you will know that I'm the least confident defendant we have in this court. Yet this time, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what the prosecution is going to raise against it, and I know for a fact that I don't have to work very hard to knock it down. Let me remind the jury, even when we did Paddington 2, we put it up against that ugly, risible piece of shit Shrek 2. And we couldn't even pit Silence of the Lambs against Hannibal, at the very least? Shame on whoever books these cases. Thank you, case dismissed.
Is it smug in here? I'm feeling a little smug.
Absolutely. Hey, we can't do everything head-to-head. I get tired of them. But thank you.
It's a lot of movies.
Ms. Robbins, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Okay, I grant you that on some levels, this could be considered a good movie, in that the two central performances are very compelling. Ted Levine is completely terrifying in his 10 minutes of screen time. And I could even say the direction is great and the character and space and place of it is all great. But it's deeply disturbing and its themes are all wrong. And I know because from the very first scene, I was frightened. It opens with a very fit but very slight Jodie Foster running in a forest. and then walking amongst really tall men. So she was strong and fit, but still vulnerable. I'm a similar height and build to Foster. We're like an espresso, small but full of energy. We get to go to the big meetings, but we sit in chairs where our feet don't actually touch the ground. So from the very beginning, it sets up women as vulnerable, as small, and it's just a really tough watch as a small woman.
Mr. Rodriguez, is this difficult to relate to, not being a small woman?
No, because I'm a small man, so and I'm very womanly, so I can definitely relate to being a small woman, I guess. But I would think that that's putting the audience in shoes that they're not normally in. So I'd actually say that that's not a bug, that's a feature.
It's shoes I'm in all the time. So when you say that this isn't a feature you can escape into comfortably and happily. There isn't. It is just dread from the moment it starts.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. It's a horror movie. You're not supposed to watch Friday the 13th and go, "Oh my God, I can't wait until he stabs somebody in the neck because that'll never happen to me." It's just.
But I already know that it's horrible and hard being a little woman. I already know that. So
yeah, but we need to tell the other people. We need to tell the less enlightened. We need to tell the people, the unwashed, rabbled masses that are not you.
I'll just raise my hand. It's on me, okay?
Yeah. Okay. So it's really frightening to watch it as a woman. The other thing, it's very obvious that I'm going to go down this route, isn't it? That we have to talk about the very regressive trans storyline. Buffalo Bill. At this point in history, very few trans representations on film, and when we get one, they're a predator. And let's remember that the trans identity is much more likely to make somebody prey rather than be a predator. And this film plays on all the tropes about trans women as a danger to real, and I am using air quotes there, as a danger to real women. And the poor guy who played it, poor Ted Levine, really suffered with it and couldn't take on parts like that again. And it would not be made in that way now. No director would go, "Oh, that yucky," with the whole trans issue.
Mr. Rodriguez, is this has a problematic portrayal?
Yeah, this is a very difficult subject to broach because, yes, this was at a time when trans visibility was very limited, and to have basically like the most prominent trans character in cinema in early 1990s have them be a serial killer, that's definitely problematic. But at the same time, they also stress in the movie, and this might be utter bullshit, but they do say that he's not trans, that he thinks he is. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that we need to evaluate this movie in the proper spectrum, and that is in the time in which it was released. If we look at it now, of course it's problematic. But if we look at it then, I think that we can look at this character as not he's a serial killer because he's trans, but rather he's a serial killer who happens to be trans.
Ms. Robbins, do we have to look at movies in a vacuum?
The thing is to remember as well about this that lots it did what's the word I'm looking for? There were protests by the LGBT community at the time. Yes. So that has to be acknowledged, that this, you can't just say that this context didn't matter, or the times were different. People were upset at the time. I would say one of the best things about the movie, in fact, probably the best thing about the movie, is that the LGBT community protested it, so much so that Jonathan Demme went on to make Philadelphia, which is a brilliant film, absolutely brilliant film. In other words, the best thing about this film is that another film entirely came out of it.
I know there's another comparison I can make to it. Help me, Ryan. Come on, there's gotta be a movie for the sequels. We call that the Terminator 2 effect? Nah, Terminator 1's still pretty good. Ms. Robbins, would you like to proceed to another exhibit?
So, the thing I really, really hate about the film, the thing that gets me every time I watch it, is that it suggests at its heart that women have to be exceptional or formidable just to avoid being killed. And that's really quite exhausting.
Would you continue to elaborate? In what ways does the film demonstrate this?
Well, Jodie Foster's character is so close to being killed, and she is also portrayed as being brilliant and astute and incredibly clever, and yet it's all just a second's reflex that stops her from being killed. The poor woman in the well has to be so gutsy to stop herself from being killed. Oh, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to watch.
Mr. Rodriguez, do you think the film paints women as capable?
I think that it's very deferential to women in the film. I think that it's definitely a positive influence, and the fact that these women have to be hyper competent is a mark in the movie's favor, I think.
Are you saying it's making a statement about it?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. There's a reason that Clarice Starling is the lead of the movie. There's a reason that it centers on her. And I was listening to the commentary on the Criterion Blu-ray, and Jodie Foster was talking about how Jodie Foster pointed out that Clarice Starling is the kind of feminist that would not go around saying, I'm a feminist, but did it in practice as opposed to in dialogue.
I get that. I sort of get it. My problem with it is that all of the men put the women in danger. And for feminism to really work, men have got to be feminists too. And there is no redeeming feature in the men in this movie. They are salacious, they're psychopathic, they
lascivious.
Yeah, lascivious. Yeah.
Hey, you're not supposed to help the prosecution. What the hell's going on here?
I get paid every time we use that word.
But they are. So I get that she's a central character, but we are looking at her through male eyes. And this is very much a male gaze sort of thing. That it's always, her hair is being swept back. She's in close up. We see her fright. It does, and none of those men suggest, hey, do you know what? Maybe this isn't right, that we're putting a woman in danger like this when all she's got is one shooter and we've got a helicopter. It just all seems very, feminism needs men. And I mean that as somebody who's got a master's in women's studies, just to be absolutely clear. We need men to take on feminism, because otherwise it's just exhausting. And that's how I felt watching this film. I was exhausted.
Well, there's the character of Jack Crawford, Clarice's boss, who has like
Scott
one
Glenn.
or two moments. Yeah, Scott Glenn, who has
It's
one or two moments
show.
where he kind of performatively talks to the other men that are surrounding the two of them in a way that kind of like brings them into a kind of a fraternity, just because that's something that's expected societally, and it's in a male-driven universe. But Jack Crawford is not one of those leering men. He's one of the positive influences in the film, and Clarice wouldn't even be on the case if it wasn't for him.
Ms. Robbins, would you say Jack Crawford's on the level?
I find just the way that the camera looks at Jodie when Jack Crawford's there, I'm not completely convinced that there's not some hint that he also has fallen in love with her.
Mr. Lecter sure thinks he has.
Yeah. And he's a bright man.
He has good taste.
There it is.
I just used that joke in the last episode.
It took us 14 minutes to get there.
The movie makes that joke too. You're to his taste. But Ms. Robbins, would you like to present another exhibit?
Oh, let me just think about that a minute. I'm running out of my notes now, but I'm sure I've got something else.
Maybe something about Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I think, yes. Hannibal Lecter is shown as being so clever. Now, most serial killers are not really, really clever. And
Well, not the ones we catch.
But yes. Yeah, but even the ones we don't catch, I think that might have something to say about the fact that then we're not good at catching people generally at crime. And I don't like how we're led to thinking that somebody who would eat your liver is really, really clever just because they know it would go well with Chianti. It's all a bit... I struggle very much with the idea of the intelligent serial killer. Serial killers are violent, homicidal, lacking empathy. All of those things require intelligence. Yeah, that was not very well articulated. But that's
Question from the bench: Does the film romanticize Hannibal Lecter a bit?
I think so. I think that's exactly what I'd say. I think there is a romanticizing. I mean, first of all, there's a meet cute when he meets Clarice. It's a yucky meet cute, but it's a meet cute all the same. We are somehow supposed to root for him at the end. And I find that really distasteful.
Ooh,
pun intended.
Well, you've given us a lot to chew on.
Stop it.
Mr. Rodriguez, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, to this idea that Hannibal Lecter can't be intelligent, would the movie be entertaining or even palatable if he was just sitting there in his cage going, "Duh, pretty lady, I like to eat people, duh."
I wish that was the worst representation we've had on the show, but
worst one we've ever left in.
But question from the bench, Mr. Rodriguez: is this a wholly original character? This film?
Wait, sorry?
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's one of the most iconic characters in cinema history, and if he was not terribly intelligent and not terribly articulate, then why would anybody care what he had to say? We got to make these characters interesting, and the way to make them interesting is to do something that is not necessarily what we would expect. And Hannibal Lecter is exactly what we don't expect: the conniving cannibal.
Oh, I wish you hadn't made such a good point.
He does that. I hate when he does
it all the time.
I hate it.
Annoying.
Ryan's very smart.
That was smart, but I would also say, in the end, we've got to be really careful about how we portray serial homicidal maniacs, and imbuing them with something extra that most people would want. It feels very off. So I get what you're saying, that and I think it's brilliantly portrayed as well. I'm not going to complain about the acting at all in any part of this film. The acting is absolutely superb.
Scott Glenn is close, though. He's on thin ice.
Yeah, but I would say, this is, for me, my major problem with the film is that it's what it does with those brilliant actors, and it would be there's no redemptive arc. You can't come away from this and feel good in any way.
Mr. Rodriguez, is it just to end on any kind of up note?
Well, it does end on a joke. The idea of "I'm going to have a friend for dinner." It's one of those things. Like, the thing that I find unpalatable about the Hannibal Lecter character is that he mainly sets himself up to do food puns.
Yes.
And that's unpalatable.
Sometimes they're bird puns. It'll be turns for us, Clarice. He does make a lot of puns, though. Are you saying puns are evil, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, absolutely. Puns are the work of the devil.
Guilty.
I agree, because I'm not good at them. So I absolutely agree.
The key's not to think a lot about them. Are you going to rest on that, Rachel?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So prosecution is rested. Mr. Rodriguez, you may present your first exhibit.
Well, I'm glad that we started talking about the acting, because I want to talk about the first point I want to raise considers the cast, including two performers who took home the Academy Award, Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. Foster, as we've addressed before, plays FBI agent Clarice Starling, who is essentially the Ginger Rogers of government agents, as she has to do everything her male counterparts do, only backwards and in heels. Foster has always been an inspiring presence in front of the camera, and has been doing so since she was in her early teens. And if you want to see the true growth of an actor, watch Silence of the Lambs as a double feature with Freaky Friday and try to tell yourself, this is the same person. In every scene, she is undermined by her peers at best and leered at worst, aside for the presence of the aforementioned Scott Glenn as her boss Jack Crawford, who I had forgotten was third billed above the title, something that probably wouldn't happen just a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins is an interesting counterpoint. Foster is undoubtedly the star of the film. Hardly 5 minutes go by without her being in a scene. But Hopkins is not a co-lead. According to people with far too much time on their hands, he only spends 15 minutes on camera in a 118-minute movie. Therefore, winning Best Actor might be considered category fraud until you've actually watched the movie. He may not be on camera for a long while, but whenever he's not on screen, he's either being talked about, shade of Orson Welles' Harry Lime in The Third Man, or represents the other shoe that's about to drop narratively. Every second he presents himself before Jonathan Demme's camera lens, you can't look at anything else. Those cold, unblinking eyes, that deliberate speech, the rigid body movements, it's masterful. And I say that considering it's not even my favorite Hannibal Lecter. That was Brian Cox in Manhunter and
Agreed.
Matt Nicholson in the Hannibal television series. Is he
Agreed.
technically a supporting actor? Perhaps. But what are you going to do? Take the trophy away from him? Do you even dare?
I'll try. Ms. Robbins, any rebuttals?
Absolutely, because what I would say is I have no problems with the fact that these were two tremendous lead actors, and I think the Oscars were deserved, but they didn't show the full range of these actors, and it would have been really lovely if we could have also had Jodie Foster just lip syncing to something from Bugsy Malone as well, or doing some comedy. She's brilliant in Freaky Friday. She's really funny, and it would have been really nice to just see Anthony Hopkins. I don't know, a tap dance. They're good, but there's other things I want from leading actors that because of the nature of the film, you just don't get to see.
I just fantasy wrote a whole script where Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling switch body and mind like Freaky Friday. A lot of interesting stuff would happen, Ben. Ryan, you're next.
You can have it.
So the acting is amazing in this film, but we must address something that is even more important to the success of the overall picture. Something that even the acting is dependent upon, and that is Jonathan Demme's direction. Demme was known in his all too brief career for being an actor's director. He knew how to whisper sweet nothings in his cast's ear and coax the best possible performances out of them. The fact that he and his cast all took home trophies is proof of this. But even better than the performances is the way that this film looks. Together with cinematographer Tak Fujimoto, who shot almost all of Demme's films, certainly all the best ones, the two collaborators used techniques that they developed in their genre-bending earlier works, namely what I call the Demme stare. This is a companion to the Kubrick stare, where actors look directly into the camera in a moment of mental derangement. But the Demme stare is not used in the same way. To bring you into the psyche of his characters, the actors look right down the barrel of the camera lens, which brings you into their personal perspectives. He will show conversations between two people as both look directly into the camera, as if they're having a conversation with you, the viewer. It's incredibly unsettling, taking the viewer from passive observer to active participant.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, any rebuttals to any of the direction in the film?
I mean, it's really hard to argue against the fact that Jonathan Demme is a superb director. But it's that, again, it comes back down. My major argument here is that it's yucky, and I don't really want to be in the mind of Hannibal Lecter, not even for a second, not even for a moment. And again, I think that you're right, those close-ups, they're really fabulous, but wouldn't it be nice if occasionally Jodie Foster was seen smiling? Or Anthony Hopkins didn't look quite so absolutely terrifying all the time. So whilst I completely agree that this is a brilliantly, tightly directed film, There is also just a little bit too much of, a dead body on a slab. It's always a woman's dead body as well on a slab.
Well, not in 7.
Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, she's in a box in 7.
In a box. Yeah, it's just a little bit too much. And it would just be nice if there was a little bit more light amongst all the dark.
Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to proceed to your next exhibit?
Yes, I have one last exhibit, and I'm glad we're talking about the dark, because as you may know, now that we're officially on our 4th year of podcasting, I am, always have been, always will be, a puss.
A puss, yep.
When it comes to horror, I have always kept the genre at arm's length because I'm easily rattled and startled by jump scares. Accordingly, I didn't see Silence of the Lambs until 2001, when it was 10 and I was 15. I was left alone in the house of a family friend and spent a good half hour perusing their VHS collection before stumbling upon this film. Since I wasn't in danger of looking weak in front of another human being, I thought, sure, why not? I was not prepared for what I was about to see, and it was such an eye-opening experience that I have never forgotten it. When I rewatched the film in preparation for this case, I was amazed that I knew what was going to happen from scene to scene, even with my terrible memory. And as each scene transpired, I dreaded the next, because I can barely handle it. And I'm not alone in this. The film grossed over $270 million worldwide and has become truly iconic. Much like how the Bible is split between the Old Testament and the New, there is the serial killer film before Silence of the Lambs, and there is the serial killer film after. It's astounding that the same guy who directed Stop Making Sense and Something Wild has created an indelible film character that was referenced almost immediately in popular culture. Not that I would doubt the skills of Demme, it just doesn't seem like one filmography could encompass those 3 films, all arguably iconic. Demme doesn't need to be overly gruesome to make his point and make his mark on audiences. He doesn't need to resort to cheap jump scares or lean too heavily on genre pulp, making it even more unique. For Silence of the Lambs is a unicorn, often imitated, never duplicated. Thank you, I rest.
All right, thank you both. All sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Ms. Robbins, you may begin.
I just want to acknowledge that I don't like not liking films. I know that it takes so much to get any film into production, but it always strikes me that one of the easiest ways to get a film into production is to have a homicidal maniac targeting women, particularly women of a particular type, in this case, women of a size 14 or above. I've listened to that idea that this film is unforgettable. I certainly haven't forgotten it. I first saw it when it came out in 1991, and when I rewatched it for this, I hadn't forgotten what was going to happen, and I knew where I was going to panic. I knew where things were going to make me upset. But I don't think unforgettable is the same as good. I still remember all the words to the Wombles, Remember You're a Womble from 1974. It's not a good record. I also need to say that just because something sells really well doesn't make it good. Mm-hmm. Remember You're a Womble was the highest selling single in 1974 in the UK. So I'm not going to buy into the idea that just because it received a lot of awards and just because it's unforgettable that it's necessarily good. I still remember being teased about having big ears at school. That didn't make it good. Nothing about being memorable is the same as making it good. In the end, this is still a film that plays on fears around trans rights. It plays on women's fears about violence. And the best thing about it is that it made Jonathan Demme go out and produce Philadelphia. And I think if the best thing you can say about a film is that it produced a sequel that's better, that's not enough to make it a good film.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, please present your closing argument.
Okay. So for putting Silence of the Lambs against another movie, obviously Manhunter would win, but we're not. We're saying that somebody believes it's guilty of being a bad movie. Let's step back for a second and ponder that. A film that took home 5 of 7 Academy Awards. A film that proved genre films could sweep the ceremony. A film that redefined the way the industry told serial killer stories and procedural thrillers in general is guilty? Are we sure? Absurdity. Hogwash. Horse shit. Demi deserves better than this blatant disrespect. The man can't defend his own work. He's dead. Deader than a doornail. An expression I've never understood. Like, are nails considered dead? But they never lived. How can something that never lived die? And what's so special about a doornail? Can't we just say dead as a nail? I guess that doesn't roll off the tongue in quite the same way, but I digress. The Silence of the Lambs, fun for the whole family. If your family is that of the Manson variety. Thank you, case dismissed.
Not quite yet. Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Maynard Bangs, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, you have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Right this way. You know, I ordered a Silence of the Lambs cookbook off the internet, but strangely it was just a bunch of pictures of my neighbors.
Delicious, I think. Who's
I guess it's me because Dylan did
I could do like a Hannibal Lecter impression because I could kind of do that thing.
That is true. You can kind
that
of do
sounded more
that
like
thing.
a sprinkler. That sounded more like a sprinkler to me.
Well, let's hear your lip thing, Ben.
I'm not saying I can do it.
All right, what if I lean back and do it? That better?
I mean, it's more Zoidberg, to be honest with you, but...
All right, hang on. I need to scribble some notes here. Silence of Lambs, not date material. Still single here, folks. Need all the advice I can get.
It's not a time to wear your bloody clown outfit.
Yeah, don't confront women in elevators asking if they've seen Silence of the Lambs.
Huh.
I was kind of the mind of Mr. Rodriguez going into this. Like, how could this be bad? I had only seen this film once. I saw it in college. And I was surprised by how much I just adored it the second time around. I'm like, why do I not watch this film every other year? But I do get the trans argument. It is an icky subject. I do think there's caveats to that, as they do say he's not trans. His problems are a little bit more than that. But I do get the ickiness of it. Dylan, what did you end up thinking?
I want to be charitable to our prosecutor here. Obviously, this was a big hill to climb. And I think she was getting to a point that I could probably sink my teeth into. And that is how we view Hannibal Lecter. And looking at this movie coming out in 1991, to say nothing of the book, too, which I'm surprised didn't come up at all in the case. We do have this idea of like the smart serial killer. And if you look at the explosion of true crime since then, like the seemingly fawning documentary about Jeffrey Dahmer on Netflix, for example, I think you can do a lot of finger pointing to how the culture reacted to Hannibal Lecter and say on whole, that's a net negative. So for all the critical theories,
but Unsolved Mysteries comes out of that tradition.
But
you can say Unsolved Mysteries is bad?
No. That's not what I'm saying. No. First of all, Unsolved Mysteries was around before that too, if I'm not mistaken. But this idea of like the serial killer as beyond human, right? Like it's not just an evil person. Like this is someone really smart and conniving. I mean, we saw that with the Golden State Killer as well, the Zodiac Killer. Like we do put serial killers on a pedestal in this society. And I think it just kind of was an apotheosis.
It's a thirst for justice, isn't it? Like we want to see them get caught.
Is it a thirst for justice, though?
I don't know. Want to see them get caught.
Because some of this true crime stuff, even for solved crimes, is still in tremendously popular genre. I mean, we're in
how could they have gotten away with it for so long? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and so that doesn't necessarily mean we're rooting for them or anything, but just that it does make them very fascinating characters, and you could maybe see how someone out there who's not quite all put together could say, well, this is a good way to make an indelible mark if I could become one of the greats. But that's unfortunately the extent of my charity for this prosecution, because Ryan is absolutely right on every point he brought up in the defense. This is superb acting. I think Jodie Foster does come across as strong as a woman. I also find it funny that she's making these feminist arguments and then says Jodie Foster needs to smile more. It's like, well, hold on a minute. But I thought she came across as very strong. She does feel like she's operating in a man's world, but in a way
and succeeding in it, though.
That succeeds, and you're rooting for her. You know, you don't want.
Is it always for the right reasons? Again, as Hannibal Lecter would suggest, the only reason she's had as much success is because people like Scott Glenn have been wanting to get closer to possibly sleep with her.
Yeah, but
that's a level of realism to it.
Those are the insecurities Lecter is attacking, but the thing is that Lecter, for having no information, always seems to be right. He doesn't know anything about Clarice, but he pinpoints her in 30 seconds. It actually kind of bothered me on this. I found Lecter very trite this way through, and it might be because he's been parodied to death so much since. But now going back, the parody is almost more ridiculous than the parodies have become.
You mean the real one's almost more ridiculous?
Yes. The real one's more ridiculous than the parody, where it's he's known her for 30 seconds and he can just ring off her whole life, and she's got to just swallow her pride and just kind of admit it's true. And
and you're right. And one of the things Ryan brought up Manhunter with Brian Cox, which is such a great performance, is he knows Will because Will arrested him, right? They had a relationship before he went to visit him in prison, and to just kind of impute that onto Clarice was interesting. But it is what happened in the books as well. And again, this being adaptation, so it wasn't Will's character in this.
No, the judge had mentioned and had questioned about the book, but didn't get caught up.
You don't think people can do that though? They can just make really good guesses. They're just really good at reading people. That's how the whole street performer sort of thing works. It's just
those dudes practice for years and years. But
in 1991, you could probably make assumptions about the kind of woman who would become a high-level FBI agent, and the fact that those assumptions
that might be the kind of problematic ideas we're talking about. What assumptions?
But they ended up being true, so you could call them problematic.
Because this film ended up painting it being true. She did not have to come from that background. The film made her from a trite background.
That was the choice, and they executed it. I don't know. What you want to do
for all of
that.
Clarice being, we were saying her being clever, she's mostly lucky. She stumbles right into the killer for the most part, and because he's being a jackass in the dark, she survives only because she's lucky. She doesn't survive because she's particularly capable. If he had just shot her, boom, in the dark, like he should have.
Okay, but
that's unbelievable if they're just awesome.
In every movie, though, it's the whole...
That is true. It's a problem in too many movies. Just shoot
really
people,
is.
folks.
You
Don't
gotta
talk
just
to
kill
people. Just shoot first.
Yeah, it's I will now read you my manifesto.
Exactly. It's a big problem in some things. The trans stuff is an argument that I had heard. To me, the movie does go out of its way, and especially even in the early 90s, that seems like a big step to be extra sensitive where, Bill's not trans, he thinks he is, this is just one way he's expressing his frustration is in this new direction, which isn't working for him, which is why he's killing. So I didn't find it particularly damaging in that way, but I am very empathetic to being uncomfortable watching it, saying if you were a woman. Now, this to me wouldn't make the movie bad, but it would excuse some people absolutely refusing to watch it. If somebody was like, I'm absolutely not watching this movie, it makes me uncomfortable, I'd go, yeah, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, that's why I don't watch Marvel movies.
But within this court, I wouldn't define that film as bad. I don't think a film has to be made for all audiences. It's unfortunate that there are some people who just can't enjoy this kind of movie. I probably wouldn't like a movie about heights or something. Something that makes me super uncomfortable. I wouldn't like a movie that does too many strobe effects. Yeah, I would hate that movie. I would absolutely hate that movie and never watch it. But I wouldn't.
Man on Fire.
Say it's bad for that. Yeah, see, I won't watch that then. Yeah. Any further thoughts?
Anyone want to lock in? Or?
Well, yeah, since you're the foreman, I'll lock in first. This is a very easy not guilty for me. I am glad that the prosecution was able to come in and present her case against it and why she doesn't like it. That's kind of the neat thing about this show is you could come in, you take a crack at it, but it's just not going to fly today, I'm afraid. Not guilty.
Mr. Maynard?
I appreciate the big swing. It is a heavy lift. it makes me see the movie through a new light where I could see it making some people uncomfortable. Unfortunately, not being one of those demographics, it didn't end up making me uncomfortable. But I would. It's good to be more aware next time we watch a movie like this of how it may put bad people on a pedestal, in a dangerous way. That said, great performances, great direction. Even if there are some problematic elements to it, and it's not really 7 Academy Awards good, I still think it's not bad. So I'm gonna go not guilty.
Yeah, I was sympathetic to the prosecutor because I was kind of remembering like some of the other people that have come on, like Kevin Caliber, thinking Fight Club was going to be like about this underground fighting ring, and it turned out to be something else, or 500 Days of Summer turning out to be something else. I could see you not liking it going into it, but I personally am all about these sorts of movies. I love the no jump scares, all atmosphere. The acting is just top notch. Every other scene of this film feels iconic to me, maybe to its detriment, as you were saying with the self-parody. I get the trans argument. I am sympathetic to that. I do think that they do take lengths to say that isn't the issue, but you won't remember that. You won't remember them saying
you won't
it
remember
offline.
that line.
You'll remember the dancing. That's what you'll take away and insult people with. So I do get that. I do get the protests. Sorry to make it unanimous because the prosecutor was very funny, very on point. I hope she comes back, but
I love the Wombles.
Wombles.
I did like the Womble argument.
So let's go tell that Sammy handsome judge.
This judge is very handsome. What a hater.
Wow.
Mr. Foreman, we heard you were talking shit. Have you reached the verdict?
All lies. Slander, Your Honor. You're not supposed to be in there. That's a breach of protocol. In the case of the people versus Silence of the Lambs, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
Well, you miss every shot you don't take. But the verdict is so rendered, the Silence of the Lambs is free to go. Hopefully, it will cooperate in the future in investigations that may result in the apprehension of truly bad films. Court is adjourned.
I love that verdict. Hello, this is Dr. Letcher, the intellectually distinct character, reporting to you live from the Gabagool Gazette. Rachel Robbins, how do you feel about today's verdict?
Well, terrified, frankly. What it seems to me is that we can carry on making films where clever men carry on killing, and we admire them for it. There will be more movies of women being killed for pleasure, and marginalised people will be treated badly. But, that's democracy for you.
Very good. Ryan Luis Rodriguez, come over here. Let me nibble your ear.
I just want to say Rachel did a fantastic job. Really made me think on my feet. And while we do not agree on the movie and never will, I'm glad that was a perspective that was actually shared, because we need to amplify voices that are dissenting, especially in movies like this, which can be intensely problematic. So thank you again to Rachel.
All right. I cordially invite you all to join me to post-trial analysis. We'll have a nice Chianti.
Liver's actually full of iron,
a terrible
right?
pairing with fava beans, by the way. Don't.
It probably would be, right?
But liver's full of iron. Is it very good for you?
Maybe a
That's
Pinot
why
Noir.
Lecter would be smart enough to know to eat the liver, because it's good for you, I think.
That's how you get the power.
It's true. I think horror as a genre thriller, it always has that male gaze in it, right? I mean, so often the victims are women, and I don't know if that's to scare women in the audience extra. I'm not sure what. I'm sure in women's studies, it's got to be a topic that gets brought up a lot.
Well, as a man, I find it horrifying that I can't protect the women. So maybe that's part of it, or maybe that says something about me. I don't know. It's like, what's the point of being a big, strong guy if I can't save that lady?
We should let the women speak.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was asking Rachel. That's why I asked her about women's studies. Schlenzo's the one that started talking.
And I let that happen. Did you notice? You talk about the women's issues whilst there's a woman in the room. That's fine. It is one of the things that does crop up all the time in women's studies, is which women's stories get represented and from which position do they get told. And the fact that women don't make anywhere near as much screen time as men in the first place. And then when we do, if we're going to be being victims or we're going to be frightened and timid, then it's not great representation. But I'd also argue it's not great representation for men to constantly being shown as either murderers or people who are failing to catch the murderers. So a film like this just leaves me a little bit cold about...
It ain't a feel-good movie. It's not trying to be.
Well, I get it's not meant to be funny, but it does leave me very pessimistic.
I mean, in the end, Lecter does sort of help lead her directly to him.
But he could have done that from the off.
Well, he sure could have, but his big thing was getting away. His big thing is escaping. That's the big thing he wanted more than anything. Mind-fucking Clarice was, I think, the bonus. His big motivation the whole time was escape. And killing that doctor, which I think we all hated the doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, we did like the doctor.
Yeah,
but bad
consensus.
Go on, Rachel.
Something awful though that we sort of do want him to kill again at the end of the film? That's not great, is it?
That one specific guy. The problem is, he will likely go on, but he has so many, strict rules sometimes about who he gets. But yeah, he does continue to be a threat. But I think the reason that the intellectual serial killer came up is like he's the killer you can sort of deal with, right? You can reason with him. He's not a madman.
Yeah, I get that, and I think one of the really scary things is when the mother makes the appeal to Buffalo Bill, and they don't even show him having seen it. You can't appeal with Buffalo Bill. There's nothing there at all to appeal to. So, yeah. I
mean, he cracks a little with her in the well. We only see a few scenes of her pleading to him, but it seems to bother him.
I think it annoys him rather than bothers him. He cares more about his dog.
Well, yeah, I can see that's definitely true. But anyway, a very interesting discussion. There's a lot to break down in this genre too, just on these topics. And I'm glad that we could broach it and that we heard the case in general. Now, Rachel, what else has been going on? What has been keeping you busy? What do you do when you're not prosecuting films?
So in my other life, I'm a stand-up comic. Which probably isn't terribly helpful to your American listeners, but if they want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at rachelrobbins.comedy. If they want to follow me on, I'm still calling it Twitter, I'm at Doris Day Robbins on there. And the reason I'm not called at Doris Day Robbins is I'm a massive Doris Day fan. And,
that explains it.
Yeah. It explains why it wasn't a good date movie for me, doesn't it? And
it worked. So I'm just saying, you're still there. So the results speak for themselves.
He's got other charms. Let's put it that way.
Here's the question: of that. Did he like it?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. And
so there you go. There was the first descent, and that was it.
Yeah, we don't always go to the cinema together anymore. That's what that is. But yeah, so the other thing to say is if you follow me on Twitter, I write a film blog about 1940s Hollywood. So that's where I post.
Oh, what's the name of the blog? I mean, besides that fact, we can follow it on Twitter.
Say that again, sorry?
What's the name of the blog?
Oh, it's done via Vocal Media. So that's why the easiest way to say is to follow me on Twitter to see me post it.
All right. Yeah, we'll definitely check that out.
Cool.
Now, we always ask recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So what is a movie that you think people should see?
I think everybody should see Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird.
Yeah, hell yeah. Lady Bird rules.
Yeah, about Mrs. Johnson, right? The First Lady?
No.
What is it about, and what is it about that you... that makes it feel so important to you?
It's about a mother and daughter relationship, and it is shown in all of its complexity. It's it's a story about love in the end, but how complicated and nuanced and difficult love is across generations, and it's also about female friendship. It's just a really beautiful, heartwarming tale about. It's got a redemptive ending, so it does an awful lot of really complicated things that anybody who's been a mother or a daughter would recognize, but also anybody who's got a sister would recognize as well. It's beautifully told.
I watched it with my mom this week, and we both cried throughout the entire thing. Like it is such a good movie. Oh my god!
Yeah, the prom dress buying scene. I just have to see a still of that, and I will cry.
Oh,
It sounds like you're crying right now.
Yeah, it is. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful film.
Such a fucking good movie.
I remember getting my first prom dress. Ryan, what is your recommendation?
Wait, from who?
My recommendation this week is one of my favorite recent discoveries thanks to the Criterion Collection. A 2021 film by, and I'm going to butcher her last name because I'm not French, Mia Hansen-Løve, Bergman Island. The film stars Phantom Thread's Vicky Krieps and She-Hulk Attorney-at-Law's Tim Roth as two married people who also happen to be filmmakers taking a vacation at the home once occupied by Ingmar Bergman, which is apparently a real place, in order for Krieps to write in seclusion. Though their marriage appears to be on a strong foundation, at least as far as the beginning is concerned, it begins to splinter over the course of the film, intertwined with scenes from Krieps' character's screenplay, a love story of sorts starring Crimson Peak's Mia Wasikowska. Considering the setting of the film, it's incredibly reminiscent of one of Bergman's most bruising films, Scenes from a Marriage, but with a lighter, more ambiguous touch. It's a showcase for its stars, allowing them to fully inhabit these characters and soak up the atmosphere. All I could think the entire time was one crucial question. Which filmmaker's home would I like to visit to write a screenplay? I eventually settled on Soderbergh Island, a place that only exists in my imagination. Bergman Island is currently streaming on Hulu.
Is that a theme park? It sounds like one.
If it's not, I'm going to make it one.
I pictured like Fantasy Island, something like that. No, interesting.
So, Maynard, you were the judge. What are you recommending?
I was going to say, I swore Tim Roth had to be from other things besides She-Hulk, but here we are.
Ridiculous.
Now, Schlinzo, you know the Rolling Stones said you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need. They also said, well, I am just a monkey man. Which brings me to my recommendation this week, Monkey Man from 2024. An underground fighter in India puts his toughness to the test when he takes vengeance out on the corrupt leadership that murdered his mother and continues to oppress the poor. The film itself draws comparisons to John Wick, which might be true. I don't know. I haven't seen John Wick. But if it's also about dozens of men who should be using guns against a single unarmed individual, but instead keep attacking him one-on-one with just their fists and getting their asses kicked, then yeah, it's just like John Wick. Probably my favorite sequences were the underground fight club scenes, which are gritty and hard-hitting and have a real kickboxer feel to them. I still enjoyed the scenes of Dev Patel smashing his way unkillably through wave after wave of mindless goons. I just had a difficult time hearing much of it over me screaming, "Just fucking shoot him!" But no, it was a fun little movie. What have we got then? We're gonna have Big Bun.
My recommendation has been out for a little while and is streaming even at the time of this recording. I, however, saw this little horror flick on Easter Sunday. As everyone else was having their holy Easter brunch, I was spending late night with the devil. That's a joke my very religious family did not appreciate, but no, it's a funny joke and I'm standing by it. Late night with the devil. Come on. Give it to me.
I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you.
Late Night with the Devil presents itself as a found footage type film about a demonic event filmed and presented on Halloween on a Johnny Carson 70s show with a schlocky yet affable host in the midst of his all-time comeback after diminishing ratings. And he's so close to dominating that late night spotlight, he can almost taste it, and thus goes all out in the paranormal on Halloween by inviting paranormal investigators, hypnotists, and exorcists onto the show in a paranormal battle royale. Caution, what you are about to witness may disturb you. there are a few things that I would have done differently in this film, but they nailed the premise. They nailed the ambiance, and the performances are great. The theater experience was a good one, but I think that this film lends itself more towards late night, in which it's set. Watch it after Seth Meyers in bed or something like that, and get creeped out. But yeah, good film. Check it out.
It's on Shudder, people.
Ooh, shout out for Shudder.
Hey.
There you go. Schlenzo, you're going to have to send us on home.
I'm very happy to. Hey, guys, do you remember a few years ago when Tyler Labine was kind of a thing? He was like a portly Chris Farley analog. I don't think he does much anymore. But let me tell you something. He has one absolutely brilliant movie under his belt, and that is 2010's Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Now, this is really one of those movies where the less you know about it going in, the better. I watched it completely cold. I was recommended, said we have
put on a jacket.
They said, look, we just have to watch this movie. And I had never seen a trailer or a preview. I knew absolutely nothing about it. And I couldn't have been more delighted. This movie has a little bit of everything. And I am really, really recalcitrant to say much more about it because, again, the less you know, the better. Now, I know what you're thinking out there. It's like, well, then how am I going to watch it without any spoilers? Get this, it's on Tubi. You can watch it for free. So if you end up hating it, it didn't cost you anything except time you were going to waste anyway.
So it's not too good for Tubi, though.
No. This is maybe one of the best movies on Tubi right now. It's right up there with Kenji.
It's within Tubi's range.
It's within Tubi's range. This is true.
But
it is a lot of fun.
All right, great. And with that, we are all at a show, but we want to thank our guest, Rachel Robbins, for joining us. Thank you so much, Rachel.
My pleasure. It's been lovely. Thank you.
We'll have you back again, and you'll prosecute something that isn't apparently as loved. We also want to apologize to the Wombles. You guys did great, all right? This is not a commentary on you, all right? This is, we say things in the heat of battle we don't mean. We hope everyone, including the Wombles, will join us again next time as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Count it.
Food puns.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.